is creation's redemption story. Creation's redemption story. A master plan by the master architect. If we really, really, really look at what Yahweh is doing, He is creating a master plan. And so, let's jump in here. We look at Matthew 7 and 8, and it simply tells us that if we ask, we'll receive. If we seek, we'll find. If we knock, that the door will be opened. Those three things are the things that allow us to learn of Yahweh. And those three things are the things that allow us to be more in tune with what He wants from us. So it's very important that we always start by asking. Ask. Ask and ye shall receive. Seek and ye shall find. Knock and the door shall be open unto you. Not that He just busts His way in the door. Not that He opens the door for you when you have not knocked. But He's waiting for us to inquire of Him. Proverbs chapter 2 says, the glory of Elohim is to hide a matter, but the honor of kings is to search out said matter. This is the same matter. Yahweh has concealed it, and He has declared that those who decide they will seek and search and ask, they will find it. They will find it. Let's look at Matthew chapter 5. Matthew chapter 5, verse 17 and 18. And it says, do not think that I have come to destroy the law or the prophets. I have not come to destroy, but to fulfill. If we look at that word fulfill, it means to bring it to its greatest point, its fullness, to elevate it. Not to get rid of it, but to fulfill it. When you are blowing up a balloon, when you get that bag of balloons, and these are just little flat pieces of latex, and then you fill it up, you make it more of what it's intended to be, right? And that's what Yeshua did. Verse 18 says, for truly I say to you, till heaven and earth pass away, not one jot or one tittle shall in any way pass from the Torah until all is fulfilled. I have one question I need y'all to answer. Is the heaven and the earth passed away?
Hell no.
All right, well that answers the other question. So I don't even have to ask that one. Good. Thank you. Days of creation. Bereshit, in the beginning. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. Genesis chapter 1, verse 1. In the beginning, Bereshit bara.
Yes.
Elohim et. Hashemayim et. Yet. Haaretz. In the beginning, Elohim created the heavens and the earth. And the earth was without form and empty. Without form and empty. And darkness was on the face of the deep. And the Spirit of Elohim moved on the face of the waters. Let's look at 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8. 2 Peter chapter 3, verse 8 says, but beloved, let not this one thing be hidden from you, that one day is with Yahweh as 1,000 years, and 1,000 years as one day. All right? So that kind of helps us to use now a rule of thumb. And we're going to look at the days of creation. We're going to look at these. We're going to line them up with the feast days.
Hallelujah.
And we're going to line them up with Yeshua being its fulfillment. All of that we just talked about, okay? All right, so open book tests. What did Yahweh create or do in the first day? Light. He divided light from darkness. There was a division of light from darkness. Day 2, what did he do? Separated waters from waters. Created an expanse. There is now an expanse in which we can live. We are in the expanse. Day 3, what did he do? Brought forth dry land from the waters, and thus vegetation came from that dry land. Day 4, what did he do? He put the stars in the sky, the sun and the moon in the sky for seasons and times. Very specific why he did that. He said he put them there for seasons and times. That means that they are there for us to observe, to keep track with the seasons and the times, right? The earth helps us, the sky helps us. This is how we are to keep, this is how we can keep track. Day 5, what did he do?
Fish and birds.
Created the fish and the birds, and as Rabbi likes to say, the fish that fly in the water, the birds that fly in the air. Day 6, what did he do?
Beasts, creeping creatures, and livestock.
Created man, he created beasts, creeping creatures, and livestock. What did he create on the 7th day? He created the Sabbath.
Yes, he did.
The Sabbath is a part of creation.
That's
See,
right.
people like to say that, oh, well, you know, he did all of those things in 6 days. And then he didn't do anything on the 7th day. He did something by doing nothing.
That's right.
He rested, set that day apart, and hallowed or made it holy.
Yes.
He set that day apart from every other day. Not even the day that he made man was as special as the day that he made Sabbath.
Made rest.
Made rest.
Yes. Yes.
Made rest.
Yes.
Made rest.
Absolutely.
All right. So let's look at the appointed times. The Hamoadim. The Hamoadim. Y'all say that. Hamoadim. Leviticus chapter 23 verse 1 says, And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Speak to the sons of Israel, and say to them, The feast of Yahweh which you shall proclaim. What are we supposed to do with these feasts? Proclaim. When somebody asks you what you're doing this weekend, don't say, oh, nothing. Proclaim it.
That's right.
Man, Passover is this weekend. Can't wait.
Yes.
Passover is this weekend. Friday, we've got the Seder, and then on the Sabbath that comes in, we get another Sabbath that comes right behind it, and that's the first day of unleavened bread. And what do we do on those days? Holy convocations. Even these are whose appointed feasts?
Yahweh.
Yes. Yahweh's speaking here, and he says, these are my appointed feasts. These are my appointed feasts.
Yes.
So what are the appointed times? First appointed time that we come to. He says, this shall be the first of months for you, for in this same month did I deliver you from Egypt, from Mitzrayim. So the first thing that starts this cycle off is Passover. We are there now. Passover, which immediately leads us and attaches us right into unleavened bread, which then in the midst of that period has first fruits, which is the counting point to start us to get to Shavuot or Pentecost. All right? Then we have the fall. The fall. Days of trumpets. That we know as Yom Teruah. Yom Teruah. Followed by the 6th Day of Atonement, or Yom Kippur. Followed by the 7th feast, the Sabbath of Sabbaths. That's what I like to call it. Sukkot. Sukkot. Why did I put Sabbath up there? Because, think about it. Sukkot is in what month? For how many days? 7th month for 7 days. And it is the which feast? 7th feast. Now, I should test y'all, shouldn't I?
Uh-oh.
All right. Yeah, we're going to test y'all. All right, so Passover. Before I flip to the next screen. Passover. When is it? What new moon? First new moon. What day? 14th. Passover is the first month, 14th day. Now, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to simply go down. Remember, we put up there the days of creation and what Yahweh did in those days, right? Remember that? Remember that?
Yes.
With no rearranging. Y'all know those little homework. I think I still see my daughter bring some of those homework sheets home where they'll have, you know, A, B, C, D, E, F, G on this side, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 on that side, and then like A goes with like 5, and then B goes with like 7, and we ain't gonna do none of that. Okay? No funny business. We're gonna go first day, first feast. Second day, second feast. Okay? All right? So we're gonna see what story we get from that. And so where are we at? First feast, right? What did Yahweh do on the first day of creation? Light. Divided light from darkness. Now think about this. Think about this. You gotta reminisce a little bit, go ahead a little bit, right? What did he do on the 4th day? Sun, moon, stars for seasons and times, right? So what did he do on the first day? Light. Divided light from darkness. Is that redundant? No. Because in fact, what he did on day 1 was he separated the light from the darkness, the holy from the profane, the right from the wrong, clarity from obscurity.
Hallelujah.
First thing you do when you start to play a game, all y'all spades players raise your hand. Spades players raise your hand. Oh, I'm doing this for a reason. I know y'all. I know y'all. I got her in training. She in training. Ooh. I'm gonna tell you, when you look like that, when you sing, you know a little something. You know a little something. So what's the first thing you do when you sit at the table with people you never played before? Rules. You run them down, don't you? What we doing? What we doing? What is this? Joker do chase. What we doing? What's up? What's up? That's right. This is what Yahweh did. The first thing he did was set order. Because what was happening in Genesis 1 and 2 and 3? What was happening? There was some disorder, right? He says that everything was there. There was a bunch of stuff there, but there was no order to it. The first thing he did was lay down the ground rules. Now, you ain't played a hand yet. That's what that light was. That's what that light was. It was clarity. It was separating. It was saying, this is up, this is down. There's no more confusion. This is right, this is wrong. This is holy, this is profane. No more confusion. No more confusion. Let's go to now what that Passover represents. What happened on Passover? He says you take the blood of a perfect lamb and you put it on the doorpost of your home. They put the blood of the lamb on the doorpost of their houses. What was he doing right there? Separating. How many plagues up to that point did the people have to do something in order to get or not get the results of the plague? None. That's the first one. The first plague when he said, you know what? Now I'm going to separate the obedient from the disobedient. And did you have to be a Hebrew to put blood on your doorpost? And if you were a Hebrew, were you automatically passed over if you did not have blood on your doorpost? This was about what? Obedience.
Absolutely.
Period. Obedience. Now, what else happened that we can see a relationship? And the other thing, by the way, that we're going to do is understand how this applies back to the Messiah. He also there said about the lamb, do not break any of its bones. Remember that? It says, do not break any of the bones of this lamb. What else did he say about that lamb? Eat all of it. Eat all of it. Let's go to Genesis chapter 1. Genesis chapter 1, verse 3 through 5. Genesis chapter 1, and it says, and Elohim said, let there be light, and there was light. And Elohim saw the light that it was good. And Elohim divided between the light and the darkness. And Elohim called the light day, and he called the darkness night. And the evening and the morning were the first day. Now, think about this. Yeshua was called the perfect what?
Lamb.
Perfect lamb. What did they say when they were demanding him to be slain and Barabbas to be made free? Let his blood be on us and on our children's children. What'd they do? They put the blood of Yeshua on themselves and on their children. Now, they thought, it wasn't what they thought. Usually with somebody else's blood covering you, that is not a good thing.
Right.
But here, the perfect lamb's blood covers me and my children.
Hallelujah.
What happened when the soldier came up to him to do as they would do, and as they did with the other two on both sides, to break his legs? He said he's already done, I might as well not break his leg. So no bone. No bone. And then what did he do? Stabbed him in the side. What came out? Blood and water. The birthing process. The birthing process. The birthing process. And we are to take in some of his word. Are we to take in some of it? Whatever we can digest? Are we to deal with Yeshua and the Torah kind of like, you know, we're a sickly person who can't hold down anything? Is that how we are to deal with it? No? We eat all of it? Eat all of it. Eat all of it. Eat all of it. Let's look at the next feast. The next day of creation, there was a separation of, it ain't gone nowhere. That's right. Okay. I don't need you anyway. Look at it. All right. He separated the waters from the waters, created the expanse. There's waters above and waters beneath, creating breathable air. Air that's not too dense with water or too thin with air, that we can take in the correct balance and not drown, not suffocate. Right? What was that second feast that we came to? What's almost time? Unleavened bread. When is unleavened bread?
Sunday.
15.
First month, 15th day. First month, 15th day. What do? We cleanse our homes of all leaven.
Yes.
We cleanse our homes of all leaven. What happened when we look at the story of the Exodus? That would have been the time that they arrived at the Red Sea. That would have been the time that they arrived at the Red Sea. In arriving at the Red Sea, this would be another separation that's happening. Another separation that's happening. What did he do? Created an expanse by separating waters from waters. When they arrived at the Sea of Reed, what did he do? He separated waters from waters. And I believe it's in the book of Jasher that describes as they got there that the instruction was to walk and to keep walking. And Moshe was walking and the water was rising higher and higher and higher until Yahweh caused the winds to create an expanse in the midst of the waters in which his people could live.
Yeah.
So repeat of history. Genesis chapter 1 verse 6. It says, and Elohim said, let there be an expanse in the middle of the waters, and let it divide the waters from the waters. And Elohim made the expanse and divided the waters which were under the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse, and it was so. And Elohim called the expanse heavens, Hashemayim.
Yes.
And the evening and the morning were the second day. Now, let's think about this. Yeshua's first day in the earth. Yeshua's first day in the earth. And this, speaking of him coming, and we look at we got to remember this 1,000 years, okay? Remember that? We read that at the very beginning. 1,000 years. A day is 1,000 years. So, on this unleavened bread, doesn't matter what particular day it is. Like today, it just so happened to be, well, actually Passover. So really, this is a good example. Is Saturday evening to Sunday typically a Sabbath? No. But the first month, 15th day, is a Sabbath no matter what day of the week it falls on, right? That's what happens. So this is what begins the confusion for people who don't understand the holy days, and they're trying to understand Yeshua's first day in the temple and when he had to come off the stake and had to be in the belly of the earth, because it says that the Sabbath was coming and they needed to get him down before the Sabbath. Before the Sabbath. So, again, no matter what day of the week, it's a Sabbath. It's a Sabbath. All right? So let's now take a look at the next one. This time I'm going to quiz y'all again. This one might be a little tougher. How do you determine first fruits?
After closure. First fruit.
Yeah, how do you determine first fruits?
Crop. Oh, you talking about how?
Yeah, the day that the scripture tells us how to calculate it.
Oh. Yeah.
So, what you have is Passover, right? And then there's going to be a Sabbath. You go to that Sabbath, and the next day is first fruits. That's when they were commanded to bring the first fruit offering. That is also the kickoff and the start for the 50-day count. So you can technically, because Passover is not the starting point. Please understand that. Passover is only the indicator to know now go forward to the Sabbath. So that will be today. We go forward to the Sabbath. That can be 0 days because it's the same day, 1 day because it's the next day, or 6 days. Because if Passover was on a Sunday, then when is the Sabbath? So 6 days later. So there's 2 different Sabbaths that you have to understand here. 2 different ones. The first one being the first day of unleavened bread. Can you count 7 first days of unleavened bread in a 50-day period? No. It's only 1. And if you stretch the theory and said, well, actually there's 2, okay? Still ain't getting to 7 until you get through like 4 years. So that's how we know that he's using not the first day of unleavened bread to count 7 Sabbaths, that he's using the weekly Sabbath to count. Because you can get 7 of those in a 50-day period. Really easy. What's 7 times 7? 49. And then what does he say? You go to the next day. So there it is. Now, 3rd day of creation. Let's look at that. Genesis 1:9. And Elohim said, let the waters under the earth be gathered together to one place, and let dry land appear. And it was so. And Elohim called the dry land earth, and he called the gathering together of the waters seas. And Elohim saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth tender sprouts. And that's the herbs and the seeding seed, and the fruit tree producing fruit after its kind, whose seed is in itself upon the earth. And it was so. And the earth brought forth tender sprouts, the herb yielding seed after its kind. And he saw that that was good. Verse 13. And the evening and the morning were the 3rd day. So remember, even in the command around first fruits, there was what to happen? A bringing of the first fruit of the harvest. That's a big clue. The clue is you can't bring a harvest that don't exist, right? So that kind of lets you know that it's tied, because already you're tied to Passover. But now Passover is tied to a season. Passover is tied to a season. Can't be any time. But what particular crop is it that you're bringing of the first fruits of? This is the barley. This is from whence we eat unleavened bread. But on that 3rd day, let's now understand how this ties together. So the first fruit, there was a wave and a fire offering. That would be at least the night that they were in the Sea of Reeds, the Red Sea. Coming out of the sea that next morning. Now let's think about what's happening here. here you have from the waters. Remember in the day 2 he separated waters from waters? And remember again during the Exodus he separated waters from waters and allowed his people to go in. And we read that they were in there at least one night, because it says that they stayed there and Yahweh stayed as a fire between them and the armies of Pharaoh. And when they came forth, imagine this, imagine standing on the dry ground. And from the waters, there is now dry ground. And that dry ground brings forth 5-6 million people. Life coming. It's exactly what happened on the 3rd day of creation. From the waters came dry ground. And from the dry ground came what? Vegetation. Now what happened with Yeshua? Now, let's look at this. But now is Messiah risen from the dead and become the first fruits of them that slept. That's 1 Corinthians 15 and 20. So here is when the Messiah rises to life from the earth. A mirror of what happened on the 3rd day of creation happens with the 3rd feast. The Messiah himself, he was put in the tomb before the 1st day of unleavened bread. And then, on the 3rd day of his burial, he comes forth from the earth. He is buried inside the earth. There is earth all around him and a big, huge rock in front of him. And they say that when they came, the stone had been what? Rolled away. Life came forth from the earth during this same period. Exactly like when he created this void in the midst of the water for his people to walk on dry ground, that they came now out of the waters, walking as vegetation on dry ground. And we know it's at least 700,000 men between 20 and 50. So if you count women and count those under 20, those men over 50, I'm guessing there's somewhere between 5 and 7 million people. Y'all know Hebrews like to be fruitful and multiply. And so that's the 3rd day. 4th day. 4th feast is Shavuot, Pentecost. Remember, these all tie together. These all connect. Because how do you figure out Pentecost? How do you figure out Pentecost? Where is Pentecost? That's right. That, remember, first fruits is that first count. That's when you start counting. And note to yourself that it very specifically says 7 completed Sabbaths. So when do you complete the day? When you wake up? No, that's just the day started. But you're in it, right? Right. And so, and I know I'm not talking about like technical or, the day starts in the evening and I'm just saying your personal day. You begin your day when you wake up and you end your day when? When you go to sleep. That would be your completed day. Do you complete a day at, let's say if you usually get up at 7 a.m., do you complete a day at 10 a.m.? Most people don't. So what's happening is we have to complete that Sabbath, which means you go from one Sabbath to the next one to say that's one. You don't just start at one and say one, because you got to count 7 days, and you do that 7 times to get 49 days, and then go to the next day, which gets you to Pentecost. Fourth day of creation, sun, moon, stars, seasons and times, heavenly bodies by which time is observed and tracked, the government of time itself, and the earthly perception of heavenly lights. Earthly perception of heavenly lights. Because we are where? On earth, right? So we use and we stare into the skies to see those heavenly lights, and that helps us in tracking time. And so for Genesis 1:14, and Elohim said, let there be lights in the expanse in the heavens to divide between the day and the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and years. Genesis 1:15, and let them be for lights in the expanse in the heavens to give light upon the earth. And it was so. And Elohim made two great lights, the greater light to rule the day, and the smaller light to rule the night, and the stars also. And Elohim set them in the expanse of the heavens to give light upon the earth, and to rule over the day and over the night, and to divide between the light and the darkness. And Elohim saw that it was good, and the evening and the morning were the fourth day. Now, we talked about how in that first day there was really a separation, creating illumination, light, illuminating. This would be where we are heading back to when the scripture says there will be no need for the sun and the moon, because the glory of Yahweh would be the light of the world. That day one creation is getting back to that fulfillment. And so let's look at Shavuot. What's happening? What did they do? He told them to wash. Let me back up just a little bit. The children of Israel came to Mount Sinai. And this is the point at which he says, wash for 3 days, set yourself apart. He says, do not come near, a husband come near his wife even. And he says, do not allow them to touch this mountain. And so there is now at Mount Sinai a covenant being made, and Moses receives the commands from Yahweh. And Israel says something. All that you say, we will do. All that he says we will do. As a matter of fact, while he was yet speaking, they said, Moshe, whatever he says, please, you go talk to him personally. But if we stand here anymore, we shall die. And so please, whatever he says, we will do it. That's the point at which you don't have to convince no more. Everybody at some point is convinced of something. They were convinced that Yahweh was in control and that he had the ability to take them out at any time, and that he meant business. They was not Holy Ghost filled, fire baptized, holiness ready to roll around in the floor in reverence of God. They were scarred. He says, I allowed this to happen so that my fear goes before you, so that you do not sin.
That's right. That's right.
He says, my fear goes before you so that you do not sin. So in other words, before I can let you know, son, daughter, how much I love you, I gotta first reinforce my position versus yours. And y'all finish this phrase. I brought you in this world. There you go. Right there is what Yahweh said. And then they said, yes, sir. Wasn't no talking back and forth. Wasn't no negotiating. They said, whatever he says, we will do. Whatever he says, we will do. So what happened there at Mount Sinai is they received a covenant What was that covenant? That is the Torah. If you do these things and obey them, then I will do these things for you. If you disobey, these things will come upon you. And so that kind of reflects again what happened on the first day. It's more light, more clarity, because guess what? It is a mean and insufficient God who has rules and does not make them available to those who are supposed to follow them.
Right.
He is either mean or he is insufficient. Mean because he's waiting for you to fall into the traps that he set, or insufficient because he don't even know about them himself. Which one of those is Yahweh?
Neither one.
Neither. Yahweh makes plain to us and lightens the path. What does the psalm say? Your word have I hid in my heart that I might not sin against you. If it's there, then I know how to navigate. But when you make me guess at it and you say, do it one or do it two. Let's see how this is going to work out. Door one, behind door one is a roaring lion. And behind door two is a roaring lion. That's not Yahweh. That's what people want us to believe the Torah is. Is that him being mean and making us follow rules that keep us alive.
Wow.
I beg to differ. He's shining light. So let's think about what happened with Yeshua. If we're sticking with this idea of 1,000 years, remember a day is 1,000 years, Yeshua would have come in the 4th day. He would have come in the 4th day. Now it gives him time from 3,000 to 399.9. So a lot of room for error. So even if we off a little bit left or right, I think we can get him in that 1,000 years. He came in the 4th day. And he came in the 4th day, and he came to be what? The light of the world. The Torah was given on Pentecost, or Shavuot. The Torah came into the earth on the 4th feast. The stars, the moon, and the sun were put in the sky for light upon the earth.
Right.
And for seasons and for times, to govern time.
That's right.
To govern time. Exodus 19:5. Exodus 19 verse 5. And this is really simple. And now if you will obey my voice indeed and keep my covenant, then you shall be a peculiar treasure to me above all nations. For all the earth is mine. And you shall be to me a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. These are the words which you shall speak to the sons of Israel. Verse 7. And Moshe came and called for the leaders of the people and laid before their faces all these words which Yahweh commanded him. And all the people answered together and said, all that Yahweh has spoken we will do. Yeah. And Moshe the words of the people to Yahweh. He said, you know what? They accept your covenant. They accept your covenant. That's what happened on Shavuot. Acts chapter 2. Acts chapter 2 verse 1. And in the fulfilling of the day of Pentecost, they were all with one accord in one place.
Yes.
Why were they there?
For the feast.
For the feast. It was Shavuot.
Right.
It was Shavuot.
Yes. Yes.
Verse 2. And suddenly a sound came out of the heaven as borne along by the rushing of a mighty wind. And it filled all the house where they were sitting. And tongues as of fire appeared. And said they heard tongues. It says, tongues of fire appeared to them. Appeared to them. Becoming distributed or divided amongst them, and it sat upon each of them. And they were all filled of the Ruach HaKodesh, and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit gave them utterance. This happened on what feast? Shavuot. Shavuot. The Spirit came and allowed them the ability to communicate the kingdom to those listening. No matter what language they spoke, they heard. So was the miracle in the speaking, or was the miracle in the hearing? I don't know. I don't know. But what I do know is that some was trying to figure out how they know my language and your language and your language, and others was like, I'm just talking and y'all actually understand me? This happened on what feast? The giving of the Torah was the giving of the Holy Spirit. The indwelling of the Holy Spirit into them so that they could do what? Witness. So that they could witness. Also, what took place on that day of creation? Stars, sun, moon, for seasons and for times, for government. Day 5, feast 5. Day 5, fish and birds. Creatures that fly in the air, creatures that fly in the sea. Day of trumpets, or Yom Teruah, 7th month. This skips ahead. Now, we got to the 50th day after the day after the Sabbath, that was after Passover, that was first fruits. Got us here, right? Got us to Shavuot, rather. Now, we go back to a monthly moon count to go to the 7th new moon, and on that new moon, there is the calling, the warning. That is the shout and the cry of the shofar. Now, well, let's first read Genesis, the creation account. And Elohim said, and this is Genesis 1, verse 20. And Elohim said, let the water swarm with swarmers having a living soul, and let birds fly over the earth on the face of the expanse, the heavens. And Elohim created great sea animals, and every living soul that creeps, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged fowl after its kind. And Elohim saw that it was good, and Elohim blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters of the seas, and let the fowl multiply in the earth. And let the evening and the morning were the 5th day. The 5th day. Now, the day of trumpets, if we looked at all that we have come through thus far, we came to Passover. Yeshua represents our Passover lamb, right? He had Passover in the earth, and he spoke to his disciples. This is the Passover. Not just another Passover, not any Passover. This is the Passover. I am your Passover. Because he says what? This is my body. Take and eat. And as often as you feel like you need to do this, is that what it said? No, don't say that. As often as every second Sunday of the month. No, don't say that. Okay. It says, as often as you do this, when do you do this? First month, 14th day. Once a year. As often as you do this in what? Remembrance of me. And as we do that, what are we doing? We are proclaiming.
Yes.
Right? We're proclaiming. And as we proclaim, isn't that what he says? We go back to what he said in Leviticus chapter 23, I believe it was verse 2, where he says, these are the set apart times of Yahweh which you do what? Proclaim. And then what does Yeshua say? As often as you do this, every time you do this, you're proclaiming.
Hallelujah.
This is your proclamation. You are proclaiming. This is your proclamation. So as you say, this Passover, I am taking in the unleavened bread. I am taking in the body of the Messiah without sin, without leaven. We're doing that. Now, in the next, we see that the Messiah was then hauled off and beaten and all of these other things that took place. And he was put on a stake. And before the next day, before the first day of unleavened bread would come in, he would be crucified. He would be dead. He would be buried in the earth. So there's this fulfillment that has taken place there with this unleavened bread, where we see Yeshua becoming even separated from life. And without sin, that he was put to death. And then we see that the next piece of that, being first fruits, that he rose himself, came from the earth. He came from the earth. So all of this fulfillment Yeshua has done, right? Did Yeshua fulfill the next? Did he fulfill Shavuot? Yes. He says that I must go, that the Comforter comes. And if you read how he's putting the language in there, he's speaking of himself coming back to dwell in his people. That as man form, he dwelt with his people. But as the Holy Spirit, he would dwell in his people.
Yes.
He would dwell in his people. And so this fulfillment we see came as a mighty rushing wind, and it came, and he says that fire, remember there was some other fire that came and sat on something else. What was that? Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. Mount Sinai. But relating back to that same thing, the tongues that came down, it says the tongues of fire. Think about that. When you look at fire, fire spews. Those are what they call as tongues. The tongues of the fire. That's why it didn't say they heard the tongues of fire. It says they saw the tongues of fire. They saw the tongues of the fire. And that fire came and it sat on them. It sat on them. Remember what happened with Mount Sinai? The fire of Yahweh came and descended onto that mountain, and it says the mountain was burning and shaking. Burning and shaking. So now you have this same thing. So that's been fulfilled. Now what we're getting to is prophecy that has not been fulfilled when we look at the feast days. So the first through the fourth have been fulfilled. What did we read at the beginning? Not one jot or one tittle will by any means pass away until all be fulfilled. So all is not yet fulfilled because we've only gotten up to Shavuot when we look at Yeshua's first coming. He fulfilled all of these feasts all the way up to what? Shavuot. So now we're at the Day of Trumpets. This is the calling, the warning. This is yet to be fulfilled. There are 7 trumpets spoken of in the book of Revelation, in 1 Thessalonians, in 1 Corinthians. So let's take a look. Let's go to Revelation verse 8. Revelation verse 8, verse 2. Chapter 8, verse 2. And I saw the 7 angels who stood before Elohim, and 7 trumpets were given to them. 7 trumpets were given to them. You think the Day of Trumpets might line up with these 7 trumpets that were given to them? Go to Matthew chapter 24. Matthew chapter 24, verse 17. It says, let him on the housetop not come down to take anything out of his house.
Yeah.
nor let him in the field turn back to take his clothes. Jump down to verse 30, and it reads, and then the sign of the Son of Man shall appear in the heavens, and then all the tribes of the earth shall mourn, and they shall see the Son of Man coming in the clouds on the heavens with power and great glory. Verse 31, and he shall send his angels or messengers with a what? Great sound
Yeah.
of a what? A trumpet. And they shall gather his elect from
Yes.
the four winds, from
That's right.
one end of the heaven to the other.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is what we have to look forward to. Now, when you hear that trumpet, if you're on the rooftop, don't go down. Go. If you're in the field, don't go back. Go. This is what he's saying. So we know that this time of trumpets, y'all, here's what I think. Here's what I think. I'm gonna give you this a little bit early, but here's what I think. I think this trumpet, I think these feasts, if you really look at them, these feasts connect, right? The fall, the spring feast, they connect. What happens when we get past Shavuot? Like the connection, it stops. Think about it. Passover connects to unleavened bread, connects to first fruits, connects to Shavuot. Then it stops. Yeshua came and fulfilled Passover to Shavuot. Then he stopped. He stopped. But they all connect, right? These last three, do they connect? They connect. Because when is trumpets? Seventh new moon, first day. Seventh new moon, first day. And again, I want to jump ahead quickly and then come back. When is Day of Atonement? Seventh new moon, 10th day. When is Sukkot? Seventh new moon, 15th day. And 10 days, time cut in half, 5 days, Sukkot. Connected. If you were going to Jerusalem for Passover, you would have been there for Passover through unleavened bread. Which means you would have celebrated first fruits right there. And you would have celebrated the last day of unleavened bread right there. Now, I believe that when we hear this call and this trumpet, that's going to be the year that tabernacle starts early. Because if we were going to tabernacles in Jerusalem, and we got there on trumpets, 10 days later, let's say you a 5 walking day journey, you gonna walk 5 days there and 5 days back and then go right back? No. Even if you a 2-day journey, you gonna walk 2 days, get there for trumpets, walk 2 more days, and then on what, the 8th day, you have to turn right back around so you can be there by the 10th day? No. What you gonna do? You're gonna stay there. And then for you to get to Yom Kippur, what are you gonna do? Stay. And then for you to get to Tabernacles, what are you gonna do? Stay. And Tabernacles is how long? You got them 7 days plus the 8th day. So what you gonna do? Stay.
Right.
So when this call happens and he says you shall hear this call, and if you're on the housetop or if you're in the field, go. You're not at Tabernacles yet. Trumpets just happened. So y'all, trumpets gonna start early one year. Trumpets gonna start early one year. Let's look at that. So now backing up just a little bit, going to 6th day. Going back to the 6th day. This is when man and beast creeping creatures and livestock was created. Man and woman have been given dominion, and there are beasts on the earth. Now, to me, it's interesting that the same day that Yahweh created man, he created that which would be the placeholder for redeeming man. He created the beast. Why? Because he knew he was going to fall. We're going to need to give some sacrifices. There's going to have to be some blood given. So he literally created us on the same day, so that the blood of these animals could place hold until he himself comes in the fullness of time to be our sacrifice. He already knew. He knew that the lamb was going to have to be our Passover until he came as the lamb to be our Passover.
Yeah.
He knew that. So Genesis chapter 1 verse 24. And Elohim said, let the earth bring forth the living creature after its kind, cattle and creepers, and its beasts of the earth after its kind, and it was so. And Elohim made, clicked on the wrong thing. All right. And Elohim made the beast of the earth after its kind, and the cattle after its kind, and all creepers upon the earth after their kind. And Yahweh saw that it was good. And Elohim said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness. And let them have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the heavens, and over the cattle, and over the earth, and over all the creeping creatures on the earth. And Elohim created man in his image, and in the image of Elohim he created him. He created them, male and female. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and multiply, fill the earth and subdue it, and have dominion over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the heavens, and over the animals that move upon the earth. And Elohim said, behold, I have given you every herb seeding seed which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which is the fruit of a tree seeding seed. To you it is for food. And to every beast of the earth, and every fowl of the heavens, and every creeper on the earth, which has in it a living soul, every green plant is for food. And it was so. And Elohim saw everything that he had made, and behold, it was very good. Yeah. And the evening and the morning were the sixth day. Yeah. The sixth day. Yeah. And so here we have, also think about this, this time of atonement, because that's the seventh, that's the sixth feast, which is the seventh new moon on the 10th day. There is a cleansing that takes place. But it's a different type of cleansing. There's a different type of cleansing. Think about this. What do we do at the time of unleavened bread? We get rid of leaven, right? Right. We get rid of that leaven. Who's getting rid of it? Yeah. You are, right. You are. You're getting rid of the leaven. And so what else is happening? You're fasting from what? From leaven. You're fasting from leaven. So you take leaven out of your diet for that period of time, right? And then you're told that you should eat unleavened bread for each of those days. And now with that, see, I got a witness right there. That's what I'm talking about. So here you have now a different process that's happening. Because when you get to the Day of Atonement, then you don't clean nothing. You can't atone for yourself. You can't cover your own sin. No matter how hard we try, we will. Whether tomorrow, or whether Wednesday, or whether next week when we're not even on unleavened bread, you will find leaven. And that leaven, you will think to yourself, this was here during unleavened bread. Why? Because we're imperfect. We're unable of getting rid of all of the sin. Does that mean you don't try? No. Because there's been years where we were like, man, we did good. I think we got everything, like, for real. Like, it's weeks later, and you're like, I ain't found nothing yet. Like, for real, we got rid of everything. And then you come back 2 years later and learn, oh, we had that in here, like, for the last 5 years. Didn't even think Yo, we used to keep baking powder, baking soda in the refrigerator. You know, the old people tell you to do that. You want to keep all the musky smells out, just put your thing of baking powder right in the corner up there and take all that smell out of the refrigerator now. You're going to have that refrigerator smell. So I would do that. Put it way back in the corner. One year we was like, oh, how long we done had this up here? How long we done had this up here? And you learn we had, oh, come on. So the thing is, we are imperfect. And no matter how hard we try, we can't get rid of all that sin. But what's the difference between getting rid of the leaven and being atoned for? Where Yeshua is our lid of atonement. Think about what's in there. Think about what's in that ark. What's in there? What are the three things in there? What's in that ark? Budded rod. Not just any commandments. Broken.
Yes.
The broken commandments. And what else? The manna. All right. So how did the commandments get broken again? He came down and they was there dancing around like golden calves, getting it in. Dancing around the golden calf. He got mad, threw down the tablets. Now, why was the manna in there again? What is this light bread? We don't want this stuff. When we was in Egypt, we had leeks and fish to fill. We want to go back there. We have fish. We don't want this bread. We hungry. Rebellion. He sent them quail, and he says they ate it till they was dying with the quail meat stuck between their teeth.
Yes.
What else? What else? Budded rod. Why did the rod have to bud? Hell, we can talk to Yahweh too. We don't need y'all. We don't need y'all either. Hey, you know what? We just gonna start our own joint. You know what? We're gonna petition Yahweh to let us be like Israel number 2. We ain't feeling y'all no more.
Right.
Yahweh says, whom I have chosen, that rod will bud.
That's right.
You put yours down, Aaron put yours down. Whose rod budded?
Aaron's rod.
All three of these things were signs of rebellion. The lid of atonement sat where? On top of those rebellious things.
Right.
The lid of atonement. Atonement, what does that word mean? Cover. Kippur. Kippur is to cover. When we say Yom Kippur, the day of covering, Yahweh covers all of that rebelliousness, and he takes the Torah and does what? Sit it right on top.
Come on.
Boom!
Come on, yeah. Thank you, Father.
Hallelujah.
Moshe sat right on that lid to hear from Yahweh and to speak to the people.
Come on now.
This cleansing we couldn't do. So he says, you know what? Not only are you not able to clean yourself properly, I'm going to clean you. So don't even eat nothing. You know, you got rid of the leaven, and you ate unleavened bread, and you went without leaven for 7 days, 8 days. But you know what? Don't eat nothing. On Yom Kippur, we fast. We sit and we let Yahweh do the work. We sit and let Yahweh do the work. Now, everybody who has children, y'all know there's a point in time where you send your child to go wash themselves. You send your child to go wash themselves. Now, if y'all let my mother tell this story, she's going to tell y'all the story about me. But I'm going to beat her to the punch. She told me to go wash my butt. Go wash your butt. Go wash your butt. So that's what I did. I came out and had all the soap all in one spot. That's what you said, dude. I took it literally. So what you know is every now and then you got to go behind your little ones and you got to say, okay, you did a good job, but you smell like wild onions. Give me the soap. And you got to go scrub them up a little better, right? Till they learn. And eventually you don't have to go in there as much. When they come out, they don't smell like wild onions. And so that's what Yahweh is saying. He said, I gave you your shot at Passover. And Yahweh wants our very best. Not because he thinks that we will ever be able to atone for ourselves, because he wants us to give our very best. We do that. But at Day of Atonement, he doesn't. He doesn't. He doesn't. He cleanses us completely and totally. And then he says, now, you're set. Sit down. Don't move. You got 5 days. In 5 days, what happens? Tabernacles. 7th month, 15th day. 7th month, 15th day. Genesis chapter 2, verse 1. And the heavens and the earth were finished, and all the host of them. And on the 7th day Elohim ended his work which he had made. And he rested on the 7th day from all his work which he had made. And Elohim blessed the 7th day and hallowed it. And because in it he had rested from all his work which Elohim created to make. And so people often refer to 7 as the number of completion. The number of completion. I'm going to tell you, that is correct, but it's not completely correct. 7 is the number of completion of a cycle. It's completion of a cycle. Look at things in 7s. They start over. You go from do to re to mi to fa to so to la to ti to do. Do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti. Do, re, mi, fa, so, la, ti. Do, re, mi, fa. Get the picture? Sabbath comes. 7 days later, what happens? On the 8th day is the same as the first day. Sabbath comes. And then 7 days later, on the 8th day, what happens? Sabbath comes. Tabernacle, 7th month. It's not a coincidence. 15th day, not a coincidence. The 15th day is the same as the 8th day. Think about it. The 15th day is the same as the 8th day. Why? Because 7 plus 7 is what? 14. So if you're starting back over, the 15th is the same as the what? First day. What happens on tabernacles? Yahweh says for 7 days you are to have this set apart gathering. This set apart time. But on the first day is a what?
Sabbath.
Is a Sabbath. And then he says, once you've completed 7 days, the 8th day is what? A Sabbath. A set apart gathering. You are to have a set apart gathering. What is he indicating here? A cycle. Is this the Sabbath that has no end? What else happens during tabernacles? Every 7 years there's a release. The Shemitah happens. Every 7 years, that same 7. That same 7. Provision is happening. How do we know? Because on the Sabbath, he says, you don't even have to work. Matter of fact, don't work. Well, you ain't got to work for this one. Is that right? You ain't got to work for this one. You don't have to work for this one. Why? Because he says, I'm your provider. What did he show them? He says, don't go out and glean, because even though all the other times it won't work to keep this longer periods, this day I have put a blessing on the Sabbath. He says in the 7th year, when we are to keep and have a Sabbath year, he says, I have placed a blessing within the 6th year that will provide for you until the 9th year. Why? Because the Sabbath year you will rest. And then you need to allow now the harvest to come and for it to be acceptable again, which happens in the 3rd year. And so this time period, Yahweh has placed a blessing in the Sabbath. And Tabernacles is the Sabbath. Tabernacles is the Sabbath feast.
Hallelujah.
It is the Sabbath feast.
Hallelujah.
7 days followed by an 8th day. He could have just said it was 8 days. Y'all do realize that, right? He could have just said it's 8-day feast. But he says it's a 7-day feast. And on the 8th day, there's a Sabbath. It's a never-ending cycle. That's what he's showing. It's the Sabbath that has no end. That's what it is. That's what it is. He's saying, I got you. No matter what, you know what? I got you. When we go to Tabernacles, y'all, what don't you worry about? Provision.
That's right.
Money. Food.
That's
Like,
right. That's
there's
right.
been years where I was like, oh, crap. Like, where's my wallet?
I know.
I ain't used it. I used it in like a week. I don't even know where it is. I had to like get in the habit of putting it in a place where, at the beginning of Tabernacles, where I knew when I got home, if I did totally forget about it, or at least when we got on the road and I needed to get gas, I would know to look there. Like that's what I had to start doing. Because when you go, provision is made. Provision is made. This is a point in time that is perfect. It's a perfect segue into eternity.
Yeah.
Think about it. It's a perfect segue into eternity. It takes you right in. It takes you right in. And so now as we bring this to a close, let's now look at this. Yeshua fulfilling all this. Passover, he died. Unleavened bread was the first day in the ground. He was there for 3 days. On first fruits he rose. On Shavuot, he comforts and leads from the inside. Says, I will send a comforter. He wasn't speaking of someone else. He's speaking of himself coming back to dwell on the inside. On the day of the trumpets, he will return and call his bride.
Hallelujah.
On the Day of Atonement, he will cover and purify his bride. Because guess what? We done been messed up. He will purify and cleanse his bride. And then he'll tell us, just wait right here. Why? Because in the Sabbath feast, at Tabernacles, in the release, in the Jubilee, all of these things line right up. He says, where he is, we shall be also. We shall be also.
Hallelujah.
Desperately